So, picture this scenario for a second.
Okay.
You have spent years, I mean, maybe decades, building your business from the ground up.
Right. Lots of blood, sweat, and tears.
Exactly. You've weathered the storms, scaled the operations, and now, well, you have finally done it. You have chosen a successor.
A big moment.
Yeah, you've given them the corner office, they have the board seat, they have the impressive new title on the door, the premium business cards, the whole 9 yards.
That's perfect.
On paper, the transition is absolutely completely finished. You are ready to step back. But you walk into the office on a Tuesday morning and you notice something strange.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Your team, they are still looking at you before making a move. They're CCing you on emails they definitely shouldn't be.
Yep. I see this all the time.
And your handpicked successor, they are hesitating on calls they should, easily be making. So what is actually going on here?
It is arguably the most common and honestly the most silent killer of business transitions.
Yeah.
What you're observing in that scenario is, well, it's called the authority gap.
Welcome to Transfer Ready by Succession Strength. Today, we are taking a deep dive into a fascinating stack of research and internal advisory notes from the folks at Succession Strength.
And their work focuses really heavily on the psychology and like the actual mechanics of business transitions.
Right, and our mission today is to figure out this exact problem, that perilous, confusing space between being named as a leader and actually possessing the power to lead.
Yeah, and the research lays out a really fascinating disconnect here. Founders and successors almost always fundamentally misunderstand what is happening in this space.
How so?
Well, most founders look at that Tuesday morning hesitation and mistakenly believe their successor just needs time to warm up.
Like they're just getting their sea legs.
Exactly. Or, in darker moments, they worry they picked the wrong person entirely. I mean, the founder assumes the successor knows they have the authority because, well, they gave him the title.
Right, the nameplate is right there.
Yeah. But in reality, the successor is sitting in that corner office, staring at their shiny new nameplate, just silently waiting for permission to actually lead.
Okay, let's unpack this because looking through these advisory notes, it reminded me of handing a driver's license to a teenager.
Oh, that is a great way to look at it.
Right. Just because the state issued the card and just because you handed them the keys to a 4,000-pound vehicle, that does not mean they automatically know how to navigate a 10-car pileup on the highway.
No, not at all.
And more importantly, it certainly doesn't mean the passengers in the backseat trust them behind the wheel yet. I mean, the card is just a piece of plastic. It's totally symbolic.
And that symbolic versus operational reality is the core tension here. The license gives you the legal right to drive, but it doesn't grant you the instincts
Right.
or the road experience or, like you said, the trust of the people riding with you. In the business landscape, the data from Succession Strength shows that most successors are appointed, but very few are deliberately given real decision-making power. Yeah. The team is watching closely. The clients are waiting to see what happens. And the successor, who looks incredibly ready on paper, suddenly discovers they were never actually given the practical authority they need.
Especially when the founder is no longer in the room to act as a safety net.
Precisely.
I do have to push back on this a little bit, though. When we talk about business transitions, we aren't just talking about a casual changing of the guard.
Sure.
Isn't a legally binding succession plan or, an ironclad operating agreement drawn up by corporate lawyers the ultimate proof of authority?
You would think so, right?
Yeah. If the transition is in writing, shouldn't the team and the clients legally and professionally just have to respect the new hierarchy?
Well, if we look at the mechanics of human behavior and organizational trust, you'll see the fundamental flaw in relying on paperwork.
Because humans are messy.
Very messy. Succession documents operate on a massive pile of assumptions. They assume the designated person is capable of leading on day one.
Right.
They assume the team will naturally and enthusiastically follow a new directive. They assume clients will transfer their loyalty simply because an email went out.
Oh man, that email. Meet our new CEO.
Exactly. Essentially, the paperwork assumes authority magically transfers the moment the ink dries on the signature line.
And human beings just do not work like that.
They don't. None of those legal assumptions survive contact with reality. I mean, contracts do not transfer trust.
Wow, yeah.
A legal title does not create operational credibility. When the founder steps out of the room, If the successor hasn't actively earned that trust from the ground up, those legal assumptions instantly collapse.
The paperwork means nothing.
Nothing.
Right.
The team will bypass the successor, and the clients will just ask to speak to the founder anyway.
So handing over the title is essentially an illusion. You think you've passed the baton, but the rest of the relay team is still standing on the track waiting for you to run the anchor leg. You've created a vacuum.
And that vacuum grows wider and more dangerous until a crisis forces it open. What the advisory notes highlight is a paralysis that sets in.
Right, because nobody wants to talk about it.
Exactly. Neither the founder nor the successor wants to bring it up. The founder is waiting for the successor to confidently take charge, while the successor is waiting for the founder to explicitly grant them the mandate to do so.
A total standoff.
It is. And the research points out that the only way to close this gap isn't through restructuring the business operations or rewriting the operating agreement. It's done by restructuring your conversations.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of fixing this. The research outlines 3 specific missing conversations that are almost universally avoided in these transitions.
Let's get into them.
Yeah, let's look at the first one, which is called the disagreement conversation.
What happens when we disagree? It's a beautifully simple question, but the findings show that most founders and successors have never actually sat down and stress-tested this scenario openly.
Never?
Almost never. The psychology here is really fragile. The successor usually operates under the assumption that if push comes to shove on a major strategic decision, they will inevitably be overruled by the founder's historical veto power.
Right, because the founder has always had the final say.
Exactly. Meanwhile, the founder assumes the successor will naturally defer to their decades of experience.
So everyone is just assuming.
Yep. Neither of these unstated assumptions is actually tested until a very real high-stakes disagreement happens in real time. Say, a massive supply chain shock hits, or a key client threatens to walk.
That is like waiting for the building to catch fire before deciding who gets to hold the fire extinguisher.
Yes, perfect analogy.
By the time you are arguing over who gets to pull the pin, the damage is already done, the smoke is in the walls, the trust is just broken.
Which is why the conversation must happen in a cold state long before a real disagreement ever occurs.
When everyone is calm.
Right. The founders and successors have to sit down and explicitly outline the parameters of power. They need to map out what specific decisions the successor is authorized to make without seeking any approval.
And what needs a joint meeting?
Exactly. They need to define which decisions absolutely require a joint discussion. And critically, they need a clear protocol for what happens when the founder instinctively pushes back.
Which takes a lot of vulnerability.
Immense vulnerability, which is exactly why they are so frequently avoided.
But let's say they do figure out how to disagree privately. The founder and the successor get in a room, they hash out their dynamic, they know who holds the fire extinguisher.
Okay, good first step.
Right. But the moment they step out of that office, they face a completely different threat. The team. Because a team that senses any sort of power vacuum will exploit it.
Oh, absolutely.
Which forces us to look at how escalations are handled. This is the second missing conversation. The escalation conversation.
Yeah, this is where the authority gap often becomes visible and, honestly, toxic to the entire company. Let's walk through a common scenario highlighted in the research.
Okay, lay it on me.
The successor makes a tough call. Maybe they implement a controversial policy change, or they deny a budget increase for the marketing department. The team doesn't like the new reality, so what do?
Let me guess. They bypass the successor entirely and go knock on the founder's door.
You got it. The critical question is, where does the team go when they need a decision overturned?
This immediately makes me think of classic parenting dynamics.
Oh, yes.
You know, it's the whole ask dad when mom says no maneuver.
Exactly. We've all seen it.
Right. The kids are smart. If dad undermines mom and gives them the candy anyway, the kids learn exactly who actually holds the power in the house.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. If the founder answers that knock on the door, invites the marketing director in, and says, "Let me look into this budget cut for you,"
Boom, it's over.
the successor's authority is instantly, and sometimes permanently, destroyed. The lesson for the broader team is immediate and devastating.
They learn who the real boss is.
Exactly. They learn that the successor's word is not actually final, and that the real power still sits behind the founder's desk.
So even saying, "let me look into it," is a fatal error. You don't even have to overturn the decision to undermine them. Just entertaining the conversation strips the successor of their power.
Simply opening the door validates the bypass.
Wow.
To prevent this, the research insists that the founder and the successor must agree on decision rights ahead of time, and then communicate those rights to the team together as a united front.
Mom and dad on the same page.
Yes. But the hardest part, and the failure point for many founders, is maintaining discipline. When the team inevitably tests the boundaries and comes knocking, the founder has to rigidly redirect them back to the successor.
Go talk to mom.
Basically, this is their department now. You need to resolve this with them.
Okay, so if you hold the line, internal boundaries are set, the team learns the successor is actually in charge. But that introduces a whole new variable, the outside world.
Ah, yes.
What about the clients, the vendors, the external stakeholders who actually pay the bills? That leads to the third missing piece in the research, which is the credibility conversation.
Right, because external stakeholders are an entirely different ecosystem. Clients need to see something tangible from the successor to actually trust their authority with their money and their business.
Makes sense.
The prompt here is, what do clients and the team need to see from you to trust your authority? And most successors rely heavily on their new business cards. They assume the title of CEO or managing partner will just do the heavy lifting for them.
I really struggled with this concept while reading through the advisory notes.
How so?
Well, if I'm a founder and I've spent 20 years building a relationship with my biggest client, stepping out of a massive renewal meeting feels like absolute malpractice.
It feels terrifying.
Yeah. How do I balance transferring my authority with protecting my primary revenue source? Doesn't this mean the actual transition of power needs to happen long before the official title change is announced?
You've hit on the exact fear that drives founders to micromanage transitions. But the notes from Succession Strength outline that authority must be built through deliberate, structured transfer, not a sudden handoff.
Okay.
You don't just announce the title and hope the credibility follows. The successor needs to demonstrate their capability over a structured timeline.
So how do you actually do that without risking the account? I can't just throw them in the deep end.
No, you don't. It starts with shadowing, but it must evolve into ownership. The founder might sit in the room, but they employ the silent shadow technique.
Meaning they don't talk.
Right. They refuse to answer questions, actively, physically turning to the successor to let them speak.
Oh, physically directing the attention.
Yes. Eventually, the successor needs to be running those client meetings entirely alone. They need to be making operational decisions without seeking the founder's approval in front of the client.
They have to own it.
They must own the outcomes, both the successes and the inevitable failures, without the founder acting as a visible safety net.
So if you follow that timeline, the big announcement party, the press release, the new title, that should really just be a formality.
Precisely.
It's just confirming what everyone in the room already knows because they've been seeing the successor operate with real, tested authority for months.
The announcement becomes a celebration of a reality that already exists in the market. It is no longer a sudden, jarring shift in power that clients have to anxiously adjust to.
Let's ground this in some real-world stakes, because it is one thing to talk about trust and psychology in theory, but it is another thing entirely when this is your livelihood.
Sure.
The research dives into a few specific organizational structures. Let's look at how this authority gap plays out in practice, starting with family businesses.
Well, family businesses are incredibly complex because you have the overlap of family hierarchy and business hierarchy.
Right.
The Thanksgiving dinner dynamic basically bleeds right into the boardroom.
That sounds messy.
It is. Say a founder announces their child will take over as CEO. Without those three conversations we just discussed, the longtime employees might still view the successor as just the kid, even if that successor is like 45 years old.
Right. They still see a teenager.
Exactly. And the child assumes the patriarchal or matriarchal founder will still pull the strings behind the scenes so they don't step up fully.
So nobody moves.
Yep. The team stays fiercely loyal to the founder. The transition stalls for years, creating deep resentments. But the research shows that with a structured conversation about decision rights, where the family explicitly agrees on what the successor owns and communicates it formally to the team, a messy multi-year stall can turn into a clean 6-month transition.
Oh, wow. From years of generational tension to 6 months of operational clarity, that is a massive return on having a tough conversation.
It really is.
But what about a non-family environment? The notes also cover professional services firms.
So in professional services, think law firms, accounting practices, consulting groups, revenue is often tied directly to individual rainmakers.
The partners bringing in the big clients?
Right. A firm might name a new managing partner, But if the senior partners, the ones with the largest books of business, continue to make all the strategic decisions in closed-door meetings, that new managing partner has a title but zero actual influence.
They're just a figurehead.
Exactly. The broader firm is left confused about who sets the direction. The strategic vision gets muddy. And more importantly, they risk massive client loss because clients have a sixth sense for internal instability.
They can smell it.
They absolutely can. However, if the outgoing and incoming partners map out a structured transfer of decision rights and client relationships, the instability vanishes.
The scenario that really caught my eye in these notes, though, was business sales. A founder preparing to sell their company to a private equity firm or an outside buyer. The financial consequences here are staggering.
This is where avoiding the authority gap has immediate quantifiable penalties. During the due diligence process, buyers are actively hunting for key man risk.
Meaning the business can't run without the main guy?
Exactly. If an owner has named a management team to run the business post-sale, but never had the disagreement or escalation conversations, that management team won't know how to operate independently. They will constantly look to the owner for approval.
And the buyers are sitting in the room watching this happen.
They see it immediately. The owner keeps answering every question during the pitch. They approve every minor data request. The buyers don't see a self-sustaining management team. They see a dangerous dependency on the founder.
Red flags everywhere.
Huge red flags. If the founder leaves after the sale, the business might collapse. Because of that severe risk profile, buyers will actively discount the valuation of the business.
Ouch.
Yeah. A business that might have sold for a 5x earnings multiple might drop to a 3x multiple.
That is wild to me. Just avoiding an awkward conversation with your internal team literally costs founders millions of dollars.
Millions.
It actively lowers the enterprise valuation of their life's work because the market sees that the machine can't run without the founder turning the crank.
But if the owner and the management team work through those structured decision rights conversations long before the buyers arrive, the authority transfers systematically.
And the value holds.
Private equity walks in, sees a business that operates smoothly and autonomously without the founder's constant input, and the financial valuation reflects that independence.
This brings up something I was really wrestling with today.
What's that?
If the stakes are this high, ruining family relationships, losing major clients, literally shaving millions of dollars off the cash valuation of a business.
Yeah.
And the solution simply to sit down and have 3 conversations. Why does no one do it? Why is there so much silence in these transitions?
Because these conversations trigger some of our deepest emotional defenses. There is no natural, easy entry point to look at your boss or your parent or your mentor and say, we need to talk about my credibility and your micromanagement.
Right, that is a terrifying sentence to say out loud.
It is. The founder avoids it because they fear looking controlling or they fear admitting their own obsolescence. The successor avoids it because they fear looking presumptuous, arrogant, or ungrateful for the opportunity.
Nobody wants to be the bad guy.
Exactly. The human brain views this conversation as a social threat. So, to avoid the discomfort, everyone just stays silent.
Which brings us to the solution outlined in the research. You obviously can't close this gap with a company-wide memo. But you also can't just force a painful, unscripted chat over coffee and expect people not to get defensive.
Definitely not.
The research provided by Succession Strength highlights that overcoming this requires structured tools. Specifically, they utilize something called Succession Strength conversation cards. It's fascinating because it takes something incredibly emotional and treats it almost like an operational checklist.
And the mechanism behind why a tool like this works is rooted in psychology. Introducing a physical third-party object, like a deck of prompt cards, completely bypasses the brain's amygdala, which is responsible for our fear and defense responses.
So it lowers the temperature.
It externalizes the conflict.
Meaning the human ego doesn't feel directly attacked?
Precisely. If a successor brings up decision rights out of the blue, the founder's brain registers it as an accusation. You don't trust me to lead.
Right.
But if they're going through a structured deck, they're discussing escalation protocols and credibility building simply because the card prompted it.
It's exactly like sitting down to play a board game.
How do you mean?
Like, if we were playing Monopoly and I land on your property and have to pay you rent, I'm not mad at you personally.
Well, maybe a little mad.
No, true. But I'm not taking it as a personal attack on my finances. We are just following the rules of the cardboard in front of us. The card removes that personal sting. It makes it completely safe to tackle these historically avoided topics without anyone feeling like it is a power grab.
That is the neurological brilliance of externalizing the conversation. The card raises the sensitive topic, not the person. There is no awkward opening, no assignment of blame,
Just the prompt.
just structured prompts designed specifically to make the difficult topics discussable, tackling disagreement protocols and external boundaries from both perspectives safely.
And reading through their methodology, the cards seem to be just the tip of the spear. They break the ice, but there's an entire operational progression that follows once the silence is broken.
Right, the cards are the diagnostic starting line. Get the dialogue flowing. Once the founder and successor have used that structured communication to identify where their specific authority gaps actually live, the advisory notes show a progression into a formal diagnostic phase.
Taking it to the next level.
Exactly. This quantifies the organization's overall transition readiness. From there, it moves into a deeper assessment of leadership capabilities and ultimately full advisory services to guide the transition from the first conversation to the final handover.
But none of that deeper work can happen until the initial silence is broken.
Exactly.
Okay, let's wrap this up and summarize the core takeaway here. The authority gap does not exist because founders are universally stubborn narcissists who refuse to let go.
No, never at all.
And it doesn't exist because successors are inherently incapable of stepping up. It exists simply because the mechanisms of power transfer, how to handle disagreements, how to shut down escalations, and how to build external credibility are deeply uncomfortable to talk about organically.
Very uncomfortable.
Authority is not something you can legislate with a legal document, and it is not a magical aura that comes with a new title. It has to be earned, tested, and deliberately transferred through structured dialogue.
The data is so clear on this. A title without tested authority isn't leadership. It is a vulnerability waiting to be exposed.
If you are listening to this and realizing you might have an authority gap growing in your own organization, or if you are staring down a transition and want to get ahead of the paralysis, you need to look into the mechanics we discussed today.
Absolutely.
Using structured tools to force these dialogues is critical. Head over to successionstrength.com or reach out to info@successionstrength.com to start closing your own authority gaps safely. And be sure to follow Transfer Ready by Succession Strength for more deep dives like this.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture of your own leadership journey, I want to leave you with one final scenario to stress test your own transition.
Leave them with something to think about.
Exactly. If you were to step completely away from your business tomorrow, no phone calls, no emails, totally unreachable on a deserted island, would your team truly follow your successor because of the unshakable trust they've built through tested decisions?
Whoa.
Or would they only follow them because of the shiny new title printed on their door? And if it is just the title, how long until the team realizes the door is unlocked?